You won't believe how crazy these lottery games are. From maniacal Roman emperors to scratch and sniff tickets, these games prove that there's more to the lottery than big jackpots. The Roman Decimation Lottery. Today, we think of lotteries as something you definitely want to win, but that wasn't always true, especially not in ancient Rome. Beginning around 470 BC, the Roman military came up with a uniquely horrifying way of punishing whole units of the army who were found guilty of crimes like cowardice, mutiny, desertion, and insubordination. You didn't want to be a part of a rebel legion back in those days. Here's how it worked. Normally, this punishment was used for a cohort of about 480 soldiers, but the Greek ruler Alexander the Great is said to have been inspired by this Roman tradition and used it to punish a corps of 6,000 men. The first thing they did was to split up these large groups into smaller groups of only 10 men. This is where the lottery came in. Then, their leaders held a lottery. In this case, the soldiers would all draw lots. By the end, one man in every group of 10 would have been randomly selected. It didn't matter what their rank was, how much they had participated in the act they were being punished for, or how many times they'd achieved something during their time in service. The lottery meant everyone was equally at risk. This is where it gets gruesome. The one man selected would now be executed by his 9 remaining comrades in his group. Stoning, clubbing, or stabbing were most often used as the execution method. In theory, this terrible lottery was designed to deal with the challenges of punishing a large group of offenders. You don't really want to kill 500 men at a time as punishment, but the military leaders couldn't let soldiers get away with disobeying orders either. So they figured the best form of punishment was one that sparked fear among all the troops. And randomly executing 10% of the rebels and making their friends do the terrible deed was the best way to achieve that, in their opinion. This story proves just how brutal the ancient Romans really were. But this isn't even the worst lottery from that time. Almost 200 years after this terrible practice was invented, an eccentric emperor took it up a notch. Roman Emperor Elagabalus invented a nightmare lottery. Almost all ancient Roman emperors were crazy in one way or another, but Emperor Elagabalus was a contender for the most terrifying emperor of all. As proof, we just need to tell you about the horror movie-style lottery he created in about 200 AD. It began when he started catapulting lottery tickets into the city center. He wasn't being nice, he just wanted to watch the peasants scramble and fight for a ticket as a sick form of entertainment. Eventually, he got bored of that and decided to spice things up a bit. So he threw a few live snakes into the catapult along with the lottery tickets. But he hadn't really thought this through. He'd forgotten that he'd eventually need to hand out some prizes to honor the tickets he'd thrown to his people. When he realized this, he wasn't too happy about it. He didn't really want to give money or valuable items to the citizens, but he had to do something, so he hatched a plan. He decided to amuse himself by adding in a few prizes that nobody wanted. That meant some of the citizens who picked up his tickets did win good prizes, but others won things like a dead dog. And some people were wishing they'd won that gross prize. That's because they discovered too late that they'd won an order for their own execution. Of course, you don't need to go back to ancient Rome to find crazy lotteries. They exist today, too. Don't believe me? Well, listen to this. The bacon-flavored lottery. If you live in Indiana, you might be able to back us up here. The Indiana State Lottery invented this bizarre bacon-scented scratch card. Well, more like a scratch and sniff card. The lottery is unsurprisingly called Bringing Home the Bacon, and you can win up to 10 grand. That's a good amount of cash, but we'll bet it wasn't the prize most people were playing for. Not when there's a 20-year supply of bacon up for grabs. Yes, it's literally a bacon lottery. If you want 20 years worth of bacon, now you know where to go. If that's how crazy the lottery is now, you've got to wonder how it started, right? So, what was the oldest lottery known to man? The first lottery ever. The oldest evidence of a lottery dates back to 200 BC. It took place in ancient China's Western Han Dynasty, and it was known as the White Pigeon Game. Interestingly, it got its name because birds were used to send the draw results to faraway villages. So, if it was the first time anyone had dreamed up a lottery, how was it played? Weirdly, it was surprisingly similar to the Keno lottery games we still play today. Players would choose a series of numbers or characters, and a random draw would determine the winner based on the number of correct guesses. It's the same game we all know and love now. But why was it invented in the first place? Well, it was a good way to fund repairs and additions to the Great Wall of China. It became so popular, it became a common way for provincial governments to raise funds for the military or public works. So the ancient Chinese government used their invention of the lottery to improve society. But the ancient Greeks took that to a whole new level with their lottery. The democratic election lottery. Today, historians will tell you that the ancient Greek city-state of Athens was the birthplace of democracy. But their version of democracy looked very different to the way our democratic government works. The Athenians worried that elections could be too easily corrupted by those seeking money or influence. So instead of relying 100% on the voting system, they had another idea. In the 6th century BC, they introduced a system called sortition. All eligible candidates for government positions, which were usually free men over the age of 18, would have their names placed in a kind of lottery. They were then selected through a random draw. The winners of the draw would then be assigned terms as jurors or members of the citizen council. They even devised a special device to guarantee the names drawn were completely random. It was called a clariterion. It was a large stone slab with slots carved into it. In each of the slots, a token would be placed. Each of these tokens had identifying information on it, which linked it to one of the individuals who might be a lucky winner. Then, pebbles would be funneled into a tube on the side of the slanted stone slab. The pebbles would roll down the slab and would eventually be stopped by one of the tokens. The tokens with a pebble resting on them at the end would be the winners. Using a lottery to ensure a fair society might have been a pretty good idea. It worked for them, anyway. But even today, the lottery is still used to improve society. Just take a look at this smart idea. The responsible driving lottery. In Sweden, they've come up with an interesting way to reward responsible driving. In most countries, speed cameras only capture the license plate numbers of drivers who are speeding. But the speed cameras in Sweden also record the ones that are driving at the limit. The cars that were driving responsibly are automatically entered into a lottery. But here's the smartest bit. They use a percentage of the money earned from speeding fines to pay for the prize. I'd bet that makes a huge difference to speeding offenses. Nobody wants to pay a speeding fine just so it's given to the winner of a lottery. It sounds like a pretty great idea to me. There's another lottery that a government came up with to counteract bad behavior. But this one is found on a totally different continent from Sweden. The anti-tax fraud lottery. In Taiwan, every time you buy something, your receipt acts as a lottery ticket for a government-run lottery. And it's not just a small jackpot lottery either. It offers prizes up to 300 grand. But why would they do that? The answer is pretty interesting. They had a big problem with stores avoiding paying sales tax to the government. They'd avoid taxes simply by not issuing a receipt to their customers. But turning simple receipts into lottery tickets had just about put a stop to the problem completely. Let's face it, customers will always insist on being given their receipt if they know they might win hundreds of thousands of dollars from it. And Taiwan isn't even the only country to do this. In Poland, they decided to combat what they call under-the-counter culture with a receipt lottery. There, citizens can register any receipt with a value of more than 10 Polish zlotys. That's about $2.30. And that enters you into a lottery where you can win things like cars or laptops. So, you can use the lottery to encourage good behavior from citizens. Or you can use your own bad behavior to start a lottery like the next person on our list. The lottery where you played for stolen prizes. And of course, we're back in ancient Rome. It turns out the Romans really loved their twisted lotteries. But some of their games of chance actually did offer prizes that citizens wanted to win. These were often private lotteries held at dinner parties for important people. You can bet they were all rigged, so the most important people at the table won. But sometimes they held lotteries that were open to citizens and were more fair, like the ones we enjoy today. These kinds of lotteries were introduced by famous Roman Emperor Augustus Caesar. But the biggest difference between those lotteries and ours is that most of the prizes were objects, not money. So where did the Romans get all these valuable objects that they were willing to just give away, basically for free? Well, when you entered Augustus's lottery, you were trying your luck at winning some of the treasure the Roman army had brought back from its conquest. So technically, they were all stolen. Think Augustus Caesar is the most famous person to introduce a lottery? There's another famous ruler who did the same thing. But this lottery definitely wasn't for everyone. Queen Elizabeth's lottery. To learn about this unusual lottery, we have to go all the way back to 1567. It was Queen Elizabeth I of England who decided to host England's first ever lottery, and it was all to raise funds to repair battle-damaged areas of her land, to strengthen the realm, and for the use of all kinds of other things that would benefit the public. But unlike today, where basically anyone can afford a lottery ticket, these ones came with a hefty price tag. One ticket cost a whopping 10 shillings. Okay, so that's technically only half a British pound. But at the time, it was more than half a month's wages if you were working as a skilled tradesman. In other words, most ordinary people would never be able to afford a ticket. Still, you had a pretty good chance of winning something if you were rich enough to get involved. Prizes would be won by more than 10,000 participants. This prize pool included everything from expensive linens, beautiful tapestries, gilded plates, and even 5,000 pounds sterling in cold hard cash. In the end, the public response wasn't great. There weren't as many people willing to buy a ticket as Elizabeth had hoped. But her idea was solid. This lottery kicked off a tradition in the British government of using lotteries to raise funds, and they still do it today. And they put those funds to good use, like using the money to make Oscar-winning movies. But not all British lotteries are used to benefit everyone. This bizarre modern lottery proves that love really can be a gamble. The Sex Lottery. This very modern lottery was launched in the UK back in 2014 by the dating site Forget Dinner. This site is for people who like dating but have no interest in good food, a staple of most dates. But this lottery took it to the next level, and weirdly, it was a huge success. Thousands of people entered for the chance to win. But what were they playing for? The top prize was a one-night stand. No kidding. They entered to win a naughty weekend away with a complete stranger. The winners would be whisked away to a hotel in the seaside town of Brighton, and they'd have a night in a naughty hotel. Their room came complete with a pole dancing area and a mirrored ceiling over the bed. We can only hope the winners had a good time. This lottery might have been designed for people who don't care about food, but the next lottery on our list is all about good taste. The Beer Lottery. Let's face it, beer is bigger than ever. And some people will do anything to get their hands on the best beer out there. But some beer is so exclusive that no amount of money can buy it. And California's Kern River Brewery knows all about that. Their Citra Double IPA is considered one of the rarest beers in the world, and its premium quality and exclusivity means people are scrambling to get their hands on it. The high demand for this extremely limited beer gave the people at Kern River an idea. They launched a lottery to determine who would get their hands on these exclusive bottles. But like we said, this beer is seriously exclusive. If you win the lottery, you don't win the beer. You simply win the chance to buy it. The lottery costs nothing. You just need to register on their site. But the beer itself is going to cost a pretty penny. At $54 per bottle, the six-pack you win the right to buy will cost you $324. And by the way, they don't deliver. You need to collect from their brewery high up in the mountains. It's a 2-hour hike to get up there. I guess some people will do just about anything for beer. Do you feel a little cheated that you don't win the beer when you enter this lottery? Well, how about a lottery that lets you win something that money really can't buy? The Pope's Lotteries. Back in the 1700s, when lotteries first became super popular in Italy, the Pope declared them immoral and tried to have them all banned. It didn't work. People loved the game too much, and the funds raised were used for things that were seen as culturally important. In fact, they used funds from a lottery to build the famous Rialto Bridge in Venice. And it's pretty obvious why they were popular. There were cash prizes up for grabs, but you could also win other valuable items like fancy carpets, sparkling jewels, real estate, and even your very own servants. But even though the Pope was very against the concept back then, our modern Pope now has not one, but two of his very own lotteries. The first is the Vatican Lottery. Tickets are a little pricey at about $10 for one entry, especially when the biggest prize you can win is a car. That's a long way from the billion-dollar jackpots you can play for in America for just $2. So you're probably wondering why the heart of the Catholic Church is doing this in the first place. Well, apparently the Pope uses the money raised from the lottery to give to his charities. And that really is the best answer we've got. It's just as weird as it sounds. So what about the Pope's other lottery? Well, a few years ago, Pope Francis made a historic trip to the US, where he became the first pope in history to address the US Congress. But he had a little problem. See, America, as you know, is a pretty big country, and it's also home to a huge number of people from the Catholic faith. In fact, they make up about a quarter of the country's population. That's about 94.4 million people. And of course, they all wanted to meet the Pope. You've already worked out that it would have been impossible for him to meet them all. If you do the math, you'll see that even if he just took 1 second to shake each of their hands, it will still take him around 3 years to get through all those meetings. And that's without sleep. So the city of Philadelphia came up with a better idea. They launched a unique lottery that helped them determine who would get to meet the Pope in person. Everyone who entered had an equal chance, and the draw was completely random, so it was the fairest way to do it. But it is a pretty weird lottery prize. These games prove that the lottery can get pretty crazy. But even the traditional lotteries inspire moments of insanity, and this next video proves it. These people all did some bizarre things to try to claim fake lottery tickets, and the stories are mind-blowing. Check it out.